All right.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to what I think we're calling the Veterans Panel, which is very awesome. What are we calling it?
Experience musher.
Oh, Experience Musher Panel. Pardon me. Well, I am the kid moderator here, and I think it's going to be a very fun evening chatting with these guys about their years of experience and basically just tales from the trails and whatever we want to talk about. Panelists, please, we are recording this so that people on YouTube can enjoy your stories as well. So please remember to enunciate yeah, just speak at your normal speaking volume. Okay, what I want to do first is I'd like to get started doing a brief, we'll say under 2-minute intro of all of our panelists. And then I've got a couple questions, then we'll open it up to the audience. Okay, let's start with you, Barb.
Can't you start it down in first?
Or I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Tekla Butcher-Monson. I am the eldest daughter of Susan Butcher and Dave Munson. So I've grown up around dog mushing. I got into racing about 4 years ago, found that it's really fun, but it's also really fun to put on races. So I recently founded the T-Dog, which is a mid-distance race celebrating the spirit of Susan Butcher. And I love organizing races, and I love supporting women mushers and people having fun in mushing in my generation. So yeah, that's how I enter the sport. Barb, how do you enter the sport?
I'm Barb Moore. I started running dogs back in 1976 in Nome, Alaska. And one thing about back then is you didn't say that you wanted to start a dog team because you ended up with every dog that ended up with a problem or fought, and you would end up with 30 dogs and you could not run more than 3 dogs at a time. So believe me, you don't hold your hand up and say you wanted to start a dog team. I ran my Iditarod from Nome. In other words, I got one of the airlines to sponsor me. They flew me down to Anchorage. My dogs had never seen trees. So that was definitely an interesting little adventure. If it wouldn't have been for Dick Mackey and Bruno Thompson, I probably would have never even made it to the start line. So they were pretty much my mentors. And then once I moved to Fairbanks, I relied on a lot of people. The other was, Arlie Reynolds. He was a very, very inspiring person to kind of help get us in the right direction, even for sprint dogs and mid distance, and long distance. So, yeah. And I've been a race marshal for the Yukon Quest, and a race judge for the Quest, and race marshal for the Toka Champions. So, that's it.
Go ahead, Jim.
I'm Jeff Kahn, and I was given my first dog by Bob Slentner, who was an Iditarod musher, and I knew his wife well, that she worked near where I did, and I was doing a lot of cross-country skiing and hauling kids and all sorts of gear, and thought maybe a sled dog might be good to pull a sled. And so anyway, they were looking for somebody to take one of their older dogs. So anyway, I hooked it up and it took off. And that was before ski jurying or polk racing. And if I'd known how to, handle a polka, that probably would have worked out. But anyway, then I ended up getting a couple more dogs and a sled. And then, as you're going along, you're thinking, man, these dogs are really fast. I'm going to get into a race. So I came here and got into my first 3-dog race and thought I did pretty good, and then heard my time. And I wasn't last, but I was pretty close to last. And I thought, oh, that can't be it. And so I went up to the timing tower and talked to the timers. I said, I think you've made a mistake. No, you are just slow. So anyway, that put me on the path of, trying to improve. And over the years, I raced in all the sprint classes and then did some stage racing and open class racing. And also became president of Alaska Dog Mushers 2 different times. And then most recently I've been race marshal here. So anyway, it's been a fun run, and I guess it's your turn now, somebody famous.
My name's Roxy Wright. My dad, Gareth Wright, was North American and for rendezvous champion before I was born. He first won those races in 1950, and I was born in November of 1950. So I grew up with dog mushing, and ever since I was a little girl, that's what I wanted to do when I grew up, was be a dog musher. And so my folks were divorced, so I was living in Circle with my mom, and so I used to borrow dogs to run. And then I went to live with my dad when I was 16 and got to have real nice dogs. And I started racing then, and first I was just racing in the preliminaries and women's race, and then and I was successful there. And in 1976, my dad wasn't gonna race, and so anyways, I ended up racing in the open, and I really liked it. And so then I became annual competitor in the rendezvous in North American, and I was very fortunate and was able to win both those races. I won them 3 times before I retired in 96, just because I was a grandmother and one more time with family, and I'd been racing for, I don't know, 30 years. And after I retired, I remained active with dogs because my son was running Iditarod, and I'd run in the Iditarod as well as the rendezvous in North American 1 year, and I ran in the Alparod 4 times. I won it 1 time, and so did a lot of different things with my dogs, from hauling wood at fish camp, pulling our boat up the bank, and so I did sprint racing, mid-distance racing, long-distance racing. I just did a lot of different things with my dogs. And when I retired in 96, I remained active helping my son train dogs. And then I would help my friend Arlie Reynolds, train and harness break pups for him. And then when Arlie retired from racing, he asked me if I wanted the dog team. I thought about it, and it was very tempting. I said, no, it just takes too much. And so he had another young man race the team that 1 year. And then the next year he asked me, well, what I would help train the team. I thought, well, if I help him train, maybe he'll race. So, and come November, he said, no, he wasn't racing. So I said, well, okay, I will race if we have our leaders ready. So I ran the North American after a 20-year break in 2016 and came in second. And so then my husband was still working. So I said, I guess I could race 1 more year. So,
And won.
so I raced in 2017 and won the rendezvous and won the North American and retired again. And I have loved, like I said, run dogs ever since I was a little girl, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I just try to encourage young people to find what they love to do and pursue it. I mean, it's what better life can one have than waking up every morning, getting to go do what they love to do. And with dog mushing, I helped a lot of young people learn how to mush. And it isn't just racing or having dogs for the rest of your life. Having dogs and participating and taking care of them and teaches young people a lot of different things. It teaches them how to make decisions, responsibility, how to care for others and people and dogs. And so I think it's just a great way of life, and was very blessed to get to do that.
Thank you, Roxy.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. My name is Shirley Liss, and I came up here in 1970. And in the fall of 1970, I had met Mary Shields previously. We took out, she was running some of Roger Burgraff's Malamutes to give him exercise and took me on a dog sled ride. And she made a big mistake. She let me drive. And on the way back, we were coming in across the T field, going to take the trail, a right angle turn to get back to Rogers. And I was driving, I flipped the sled over, Mary rolled in the snow. I hung on and got drugged back the last mile to Roger's house. And he was out in the yard and told me that that was not how things were done. So eventually he gave me a Malamute named Fuzzbutt. And she had some pups, and I had 2, and then I had 3, and then I had 5. And I got a sled and started running around it in Goldstream Valley. For about the next 4 or 5 years, I was known as the terror of the valley because I had these 525-pound dogs that went really slow. And, you know, Malamutes sometimes have a tendency to fight. And they do it at the most inopportune time when another team is around and everybody can see me and have a disaster. But I loved them. I had them. Eventually, I got Alaskan Huskies mixed in, took a few trips, wandered around Goldstream Valley a bit. Then my friend Carol and I made a trip from Fairbanks to Nome. And we left on Ash Wednesday, got to Nome on Good Friday. So that was our Lenten penance. Then in '84 came the quest. And you only have one chance to sign up for the first race. So I signed up, did the first quest, came in last, signed up the next year to do it the other way, and I came in second from last. And I realized it would take 30 years before I would win the thing, so that was it. I helped out on the quest numerous years. I was a ham radio operator, and I mushed into Maisie May and ran the checkpoint there for a week or so, and did the same thing at Circle a few times. And that was the end of my racing career. So after that, I just had a team and wandered around Goldstream, took trips into the White Mountains, took trips with Mary into the South, just sort of wandered around and worked on the trails in the valley. And I think my last sled dog ride was probably about 7 years ago. That's when my career as a musher ended, but it was a good run.
Thank you, Shirley.
Ron?
Hello, I'm Ron Tinsley. My cousins used to call me Rotten Ron, but I came up here as an ear, nose, and throat surgeon in 1973. I ended up in Anchorage. And in my residency in Baltimore, I think I had the experience of doing maybe one major ear surgery. And to this day, I have no idea what I was just told what every move and every cut, and I have no idea what I did. And backing up for a second, I always think, well, it doesn't pay for an old Black boy to grow up in the United States. And I sort of say that is because it has nothing to do with that. If you are determined to do what you are supposed to do. And the things that have occurred, that have happened to my life and my experiences have been remarkable. They couldn't have been better. To be stationed at the Alaska Native Medical Center in Anchorage in 1973, at which time I started seeing dog racing, and I knew about that, and I already had bought a sled from Dr. Roland Lombard way back then when I was still in Baltimore. But the thing is that life is as good as where somehow or other your soul is put. And the experience I had learning to do micro ear surgeries in Anchorage, Alaska, at the Alaska Native Medical Center it couldn't have been better if I'd been a millionaire and they could have said, this is the best place in the world to go. And Anchorage was the best place in the world to go. And it's getting off the subject of dog mushing, but the fact is that while I was there in Anchorage, my wife and kids, and we saw our first fur rendezvous race. That was 1974. And Carl Huntington started the Iditarod. And I can still remember him limping and wearing this fur trapper hat and so on. And I got to know Carl fairly well. And I raced against Leonard, his younger half brother. And so it's been a very interesting world here. And it hasn't been a good life for me, being number one, growing up poor. And to get into something that makes you even poorer. And there are times I'd get home and I'd be trying to feed my dogs, and they'd call me and I say, I just got home. And they said, get your butt in here. We got a bad nosebleed nobody else can take care of. And so it was a very interesting life. But the fact is that there are many times and many moments and hours that I had a chance to hear people's stories. And if it comes back to that, I'd like to tell a few stories about some of the old timers that grew up in the villages that helped run the diphtheria serum in 1925. Two of whom I knew personally, and I have them on tape. I have Edgar Nolan on tape at least. And Joe Rennington, the fact that I was a dog musher, that was a man that everyone in the world should have had the opportunity to meet. He was a perfect example of what people should be, in this world. I'd knock on his door, he'd open the door, big smile, and he said, come in, we're about ready to have dinner. People on the East Coast, if you call them, and they're at dinner time, they're insulted because you call them during the dinner time, much less invite you in, find a chair for you.
Thanks, Ron.
Oh, now you can pass it to me after that. Thanks, Ron. My name is David Plum. I moved up here in January 1979. That happens to be significant because I moved here from El Paso, Texas. I was in the military, I was in the Army Veterinary Corps, and I had not wanted to come to Alaska. I had resisted coming to Alaska during the pipeline when they called me, and I really had no desire. But when Uncle Sam decides to move you, you move. And I had hunting dogs. I never particularly liked huskies. And within a few months of my being here, a 6-week-old black and white husky puppy showed up got picked up on post and dropped off at the clinic. And it was a stray dog. And I figured this little cute bundle of love, somebody's going to roll in on it any day. And nobody did. Nobody claimed it. So, as we say, I adopted a husky. And I think anybody else here knows that once you get one husky, it's pretty much downhill from there. And the 2 hunting dogs ended up going back to the lower 48. And it's been huskies ever since 1979. Built my first dog sled in 1980. And because I looked at sleds at the time and I said, oh, I can do that. And I still keep that first dog sled. Of all the thousands of dog sleds I've built, it's still around just to remind me where I started from. But ever since then, I have been building dog sleds. And I have built somewhere between 2,500 and probably 2,800 sleds right now in my career. Started mushing in 1979, again, with friends, went out and made the mistake of letting me drive dogs, 3 dogs, I remember, and fell in love with it. As usual, got more dogs. Was on the first board of directors and helped set up the Yukon Quest race. I was on the rules committee. and did sign up for the first race and made it a little past Eagle, and then turned around, or a little past Circle, and then turned around and went back and scratched in Circle, and realized at that point in time that I was not a dog sled racer. But ever since then, I've been enjoying running dogs. Really blessed to have a wonderful partner in life, Joanne, who is still on the runners, and hoping to get back on the runners myself a little bit more this year. I've been off. I had some back surgery a few years ago, and working to get back on there. But as far as building sleds, I am as busy building sleds right now as I have ever been in my life. And a full range of sleds, from huge freight sleds to little children's sleds. So it's been absolutely wonderful.
Oh, okay. I'm Kathy Lenager, and I came here in March of 1975. I came to Nenana, originally from New York City, and then Connecticut, went to college in New Jersey, and through a lot of crazy things, I ended up being able to rent a cabin in Nenana for $35 a month. And I didn't like cold weather, so I figured I'd last a couple of months. And then maybe time went on, and then it started snowing, and then one day I looked out my window and a dog team went by. It was Mitch Dementoff, and he was wearing all these furs, and I thought it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. I didn't know people did stuff like that. So pretty soon a woman named Barbara said, "Would you like to go for a ride?" And I said, "Sure." So we went out for a ride, and then I could still see this like it was yesterday. She let me stand on the runners going back in, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so incredible. And I knew I was hooked. So pretty soon people gave me dogs, and I got a sled. And then to feed them, I had to get a boat and a motor and nets. And so I learned how to fish, and then I got my own cabin, and then I had a life, and I loved it. Being out in nature, and every day was different. So then in 1980, a friend and I, we went to Jackson, Wyoming to help this company set up a sled dog tour business. And I didn't think I'd like it because I like being out there by myself, the dogs. So I'm giving rides, in the Tetons. It was beautiful. And one day some woman said, "You are so lucky to get paid to do what you love." And I was like, oh, that's right. I was used to getting paid for doing things I didn't love, and then I got to do what I love. So that changed everything. And a couple of years later, I started a sled dog tour business with my ex Doug, and I have been doing it ever since. And I have loved every minute. I have met people from all over the world, and a lot of it, we're still really good friends right now. And I've made really good money and doing what I love, and I love these dogs. Every day is different, and to see how happy these dogs are doing it. I take in a lot of dogs that nobody wants. Anyway, oh my gosh, they love doing tours and having their picture taken, getting a snack. So anyway, I can't believe how fast the years go by. But yeah, I've loved it.
Thank you, Katie. Mari. I have to speak into that microphone.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Mari Herrero. I grew up in Norway. I was 6 years old, and my family went to a resort outside Oslo and stayed there, and there was a team of Greenland Eskimo dogs there, and they gave me a ride. And I never forgot, I guess, because I must have decided at that time that I wanted to get into sled dogs. I ended up buying my own first Siberian back in 73. And had been practicing with my aunt's Samoyed when I would go on ski trips. I was really into skiing big time, cross-country skiing and downhill. And I would have to end up putting the dog in the pulk and pull her home, but she loved to go. And every time I learned a lot about good feet at that time, not to get Samoyeds. I got I started racing with in Nordic style dog machine, where where you ski. There was not any ski draw races back then. We actually had Nordic style where you ski behind a dog in a pulk, or two dogs in a pulk, or three dogs in a Nansen sled, which you could ski behind instead of standing on the runners. And did that for about 8 years in Norway. I was getting more and more competitive. I was getting a few more dogs there, and ended up going to a race in Sweden where I met Earl and Natalie Norris. They were over there for a seminar. And back then we had to raise purebred dogs in Norway and Sweden and in Europe. So, either you run the Nordic breeds, or you were into German short-haired pointers are starting to be very popular. People were racing actually some German shepherds, good Irish setters, giant schnauzers you saw on the trail, and all kinds of purebred breeds. But I had some really nice Siberian Huskies that were bred for running, and they came basically out of Seppala line and dogs that Helge Ingstad had brought to Norway in 1959. And so I had people, good people getting me started, and I met the right people. And that's what, when I finished with high school, I wanted to take a year off, and I was going to go back to university in Norway, but I wanted to go to Alaska 1 year because that's where, so I stayed with Earl and Natalie Norris and was their handler for the whole next winter. In 1980, I came over and ended up ski coach at UAA in Anchorage, Sami Ski at this Willow Winter Carnival, and he's like, you need to, we could have you on our ski team. I said, no, I'm going back to Norway. I don't know, maybe I can just check it out, and I ended up getting a scholarship skiing for UAA for the next few years. But I never forgot about the dogs. But I got to race my first open race with Earl's dogs, Siberians, and it was quite an experience on the Exxon Open and the women's rendezvous that year. Just learned a lot, and ended up. I did a lot of ski drawing, we did that for training, and people started seeing that. And one day we did a big thing at the Open North American on the third day going down the street. And that's when Carol Kaner came up to me and he said, I didn't know that was a sport. I said, yeah, it's a big sport in Norway. And and that's how we got started with starting writing a book eventually later on, me and Carol. So she was a writer and I was the ski drawer musher person. And yeah, I'm still here today.
Thanks, Mari. Roger and Mary, do you have enough bandwidth to introduce yourself? Thanks, Bob.
Okay, there you go.
This is Mary Shields. I came to Alaska in 1965 from Wisconsin to work for the Campfire Girls. We did day camps all around in the villages. and I just fell in love with the land. The other counselors went home after the first summer. I went home and finished up my work at the university, came back the next summer, and then I stayed. And I wanted to build a cabin out in the woods somewhere. I knew nothing about building cabins or living in the woods. I was a brownie dropout as a child. But the Parks Highway wasn't there, and to go down to Denali Park, we took the train, and the conductors on the train would eavesdrop on your conversations, and they knew I wanted to live in a little cabin. And the friend that was going to come with me got a teaching job at the last minute, so I was by myself. And the conductor told me about a cabin halfway between Fairbanks and Anchorage. Nobody had lived in it for 7 years. The conductor said I could live there. So I went back to Fairbanks, gathered up some stuff, took the train down. They stopped the train, let me out, and then the train went down the tracks. I walked down the trail, and there was the most dilapidated cabin you could imagine. When I opened the door, 2 big fat porcupines came waddling out. So I checked inside. The stove was in pretty good shape. Stovepipe had a few holes, but I could put tinfoil in them. There was a board for a table and a tree stump for a chair, an army surplus cot, no mattress or anything, but it had the basics. But the best part, when I went outside the cabin, there was Denali about 49 miles to the northwest, and a little beaver pond out in front of the cabin, so it was perfect. Some friends of mine, Mike and Sally Jones back in Fairbanks, they had doubts whether I could stay alive down at this little cabin. In October, they came down to visit me, and they saw me dragging in firewood, bringing in pails of water, and they suggested a few sled dogs would help. And they had lived up near the village of Ambler and learned how to mush from the Inupiat people. And now they were back in Fairbanks, and they weren't using their dogs as a dog team. So they went back to Fairbanks, loaded up some dogs on the train, the next southbound train. The engineer blew the whistle. I went out to the tracks. Out came an old sled full of Purina dog chow. 3 dogs on chains, a little letter on the back of the sled that said, "Dear Mary, there's nothing to it. Just put the dogs in front of the sled." And that is basically how they do it. But when the train took off, the 3 dogs got in a big fight, and I didn't know what to do. I was screaming at them. I was crying. Finally, I unchained them all. They went down the trail to the cabin. I pulled the sled with all the dog food down. And then this week, I just worked with a dog that was going to be the lead dog. As soon as I opened up one of those bags of dog food, they were right there. Second week, I put 2 dogs together. Third week, I put all 3. But those dogs belonged to Mike and Sally, and I had to bring them back to Fairbanks in spring. And when I came back, I went to the university, and I'd walk by this house on Yankovich Road, and the dogs would always bark at me. And one day, just for the heck of it, I got up my nerve and I knocked on the door, and Roger Burgraff came to the door. And I said, "Do you want any help training your dogs or running them?" And he said, "If you can take this dog, Nacky, down to Belaine Lake, make her turn around and bring her back, I'll let you run my dogs." And luckily, she did just what I asked her to do. And then Shirley kind of filled you in on some of our excursions running Roger's dogs. He was very kind to let me have that experience, and then I was sucked in for sure. I would like to say one more thing that Shirley left out about her training her dogs. We were kind of afraid to run into Shirley when her dogs were in fighting mode because she wore glasses that would fog up and she couldn't see you coming. You'd meet her head on and there they go. One day I was coming across the Goldstream store, hard packed by the gas station, and Shirley was coming from another direction. And I thought, oh no, we're going to have a giant fight here. All of a sudden, Shirley's team turned around and they went the other way. When I got home, I called her up, "Shirley, how did you do that?" And this was a time when I think it was Gainsburger made dog food that looked like hamburgers, and they were wrapped in cellophane. Well, Shirley was very smart. She'd train her dogs to come to the back of the sled when they heard the cellophane being rustled, and then they get a treat, and they go the other way. And then eventually all she had to do was crinkle the cellophane and the dogs would come back. And that's how she in the parking lot. It was genius. I just wanted, she wasn't going to tell you that story, but that was a great piece of dog mushing. But Roger is sitting right next to me. Let him tell you his version of dog mushing.
Well, it's been an interesting life. I was brought up around dogs, and they provided a good. They were well. They helped me through some tough times. My stepfather was alcoholic, and I had to leave home when I was 14, and I ended up in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region. And I had kind of a rough time in school. I missed a lot of classes, so I took postgraduate studies in high school, if you could believe that. But I finally was able to enter Cornell University, and really had some interesting experiences there. Summers I used to take off, and I had that spirit of adventure. And in 1953, I came to Alaska. I found a place to stay with a family of 3 kids, and they were really great. And that year I worked construction, worked in the lumber mill, and met some really interesting people. And when fall came around, I was ready to return to Cornell. Well, I always wanted a sled dog, and the Argot Singers introduced me to let's see. Well, his name was Heimeller. He was formerly in the service. He they used sled dogs in Italy, in the mountains there when they were fighting the Germans, and he inherited the sled dog team that he had, and they had a litter of pups, and I was fortunate enough to be able to get Chinook. He later became known as Tripod. Unfortunately, he got hit by a car, and he lost his left leg. And he's provided the basis of the early dog team that I had started out with. I was always interested in history. Dogs played a very important role in transportation in the early days, and the freighting interested me. And of course, the dogs were used extensively for traveling between villages and towns. And so Tripod ended up providing me with a dog team, and we ran dogs for quite a while. In 1973, became I was active in the Dog Mushers Association and ended up being the president of the Dog Mushers. I think it was in 1972 or 73. That year, the warm-up shack burned down, and that added to the challenge of putting on the races. But we put up a shack, which we use for a warm-up shed, a shack, until, you know, the present structure was built. But I did a lot of things with the dogs. I did a lot of freighting between different areas. I also had and did worked. I worked for the Park Service for a while as under the VIP program and helped them train their dogs for years. They didn't have dogs, you know, and then they decided to get some. So we went on quite a few patrols in the park. And of course, I had the knowledge of freighting. We hauled in
Thank
stoves
you,
and
Roger.
other.
I'm gonna cut your intro there.
Yeah.
So we can get also to questions.
Okay, well, that's fine. Well, it's been a good experience, and I know quite a few of you folks there. And, I'm glad to see us reminiscing a little bit. I could tell you a lot more stories, but other people need to talk too. Okay.
We're all
thank
going
you.
to tell some stories. Okay. What I want to get to is I want to talk a little bit about just like some of the stuff, because like when we're all standing on the back of the runners daydreaming, we're probably like, oh, what was this like 30 years ago? So I was hoping popcorn style, you guys could give us just a short answer of what a piece of equipment is that like has changed, that changed over your 10-year mushing, or is a piece of equipment that you loved and used. It could be something that was on your body, something that was on your sled, something that was on your dogs, or just a piece of equipment that you wish you had when you were mushing. Anyone has answers? You can think on that for a sec. Audience, do we have any topics we want to hear from these guys?
I can throw something out. You know, as obviously as a sled builder, what you do not see anymore are things like this. This is half of a brake. This is what, seriously, this is what used to be called a brake. It attached to a board that attached very often with a little hinge up here attached to a cross piece and bungeed down. Like I said, this is only half, so. And on the other end of that spectrum, you have things like this, which weigh about as much as some sleds do nowadays. So certainly from the sled building perspective, the biggest change is 30 years ago, you would have never found a bar brake on a sled. Today, you will never find a pedal brake on a sled. And as we were talking about earlier, the fact that none of us had drags in the old days. It was called bunny boots.
Yep.
And a lot of us now are suffering from ankle issues and foot issues, probably because we were using our feet as drags. And these brakes tore off on a regular basis. Think early season, hitting a stump, what can go wrong? So which meant a lot of us ran actually without brakes and just used our feet. So that was probably the biggest change.
I remember going through like a pair of boots every winter because you used your feet so much and it just tore them up. But when that track came out, I think it was Rick Swenson who came up with that idea, that just changed everything. It was like, I can't believe I can actually slow down and stop with just a piece of snow machine track, not a broken bar or this or that. So that revolutionized everything.
Mari,
And when
you
you-
said that
First
ski
thing,
joring wasn't really.
Well, the
Oh,
first
Mary,
thing
go ahead.
that when I first started running dogs in Alaska, I remember Earl, he would just give me a new sled every day to see if I could handle it. But he always tied up the brake. It's like, You're not allowed to use that brake. That was tied up. So we only had like a single prong hook to as a anchor also. So I learned not to use my brake at all and just use my foot as a drag.
What were you gonna say, Mary?
When I started out, we didn't have ice hooks, and we wanted to stop. We'd flip the sled on its side and sit on it, and that did not work very well a lot of the time. The dogs would just take off, and you'd be dragging behind your sled and trying to tip it up and get on it and slow them down. So when the ice hooks came out, that was a nice relief.
Any favorite gear at this end of the table? One thing I love during your intros is, yes, we heard the words like distance and sprint, but we didn't really hear it as this big dividing gap in mushing. So I was wondering if you guys could talk to the process of like them becoming such different sports, distance racing and sprint racing, or just the experience of dog mushing as a whole without this differentiation. Because I do find in the education committee, as we put together these panels and lectures, it sometimes feels like we're speaking two different languages in distance and sprint mushing.
No, the interesting part is in Nome, you had to have a versatile dog. In other words, they could run sprints and also run mid distance. At the beginning of the year, you could run the dogs. We would run them like anywhere from a 6-mile race to a 12-mile race up to a 15. And then all of a sudden you would jump to a 50. So, I mean, you had to have a dog team that could have the consistency of the speed, but yet have the endurance of the long distance. So you ended up with a more versatile dog versus now where you have a sprint dog, but a lot of the mid-distance dogs are now looking more like a sprint dog. So, and so that, if you look at the evolution of it, it's kind of interesting how it's all changed, because the old style sled dogs were square, blocky dogs. And now if you look at them, they're leggier, more thinner bodied, and they have a deeper chest, especially for the mid distance and the long distance dogs.
Well, the Iditarod just started in what, 73 or 74? So from the time when dogs were no longer used on the track line and for transportation, like in the 50s, and the snow machine came in the 60s, the dogs that were being run, it was only sprint racing. And the Rendezvous in North American were the breeding grounds for the ideal dog, because they have to have speed and endurance. And the first mushers running the Iditarod were just running the same dogs that everybody was running in other races. And a good dog is a good dog, and it's how you train them. And the training isn't just physical, it's also mental training. And so if you take a good Alaskan sprint dog, it can run the Iditarod and vice versa. Because like in I think it was 83, I was going to run the Iditarod because I thought, oh, I want to do that. And so, but about a month before the race, I said, oh, well, it'd be my only race, I don't know. So I speeded my team up and took a little weight off them. I ran the race here in Fairbanks, and then the women's race, and then the Rendezvous. And I think I came in, I forget what in the women's race, but I came in 6th place in the Rendezvous. And 10 days later, I went on the Iditarod, and I came in 23rd. And with the introduction of the German short-haired pointers that Egil Ellis was running from Norway, that's when the big divide in dogs began, because those dogs are not they don't have the fur coat or the feet or mentally the aptitude for distance racing that the Alaska Husky does. So, but they're very good at giving it their all for sprint racing. And because Egel was winning, everybody went to the German short hairs. And, you know, some people think it's good, some don't think it's good. I personally love just the Alaska Husky because when I was racing and winning, my dogs, I could sell them either to limited class racers, open class sprint racers, and I did a rod racers. I mean, my son got dogs from my dad, his grandpa, and from me, and he those same dogs that were running sprint racing, my son came in twice. Twice he came in second place, and I did a rod. So there just became a divide.
Let's drill down a little bit on using those same Alaskan Huskies for Go ahead.
Mary wants to.
Oh, go ahead, Mary. Then we're gonna get back to that.
I would love to say something. You're missing a whole category. There are recreational teams that don't want anything to do with racing.
Heck yeah.
We want dogs. Yeah, you said there's sprint and long distance, but there are recreational teams that use the dogs to haul firewood, to bring logs in to build a cabin, to bring water up from the creek, and to go on camping trips for the fun of it, not to for anything else. And that's what I like that for. That's what I've done all my life. Dog. You're not worried about eating somebody else. It's the state sport of Alaska, not racing, but dog sledding.
I super
Yeah,
appreciate
I'd like to agree with Mary. There are people that and I was very involved with AMA for many years, and of course, one of the things I used the dogs for work. I did many expeditions, both glacial freighting, hunting, and hauling freight between villages. And the type of gear we used, of course, was the old freight sled. We used the G-pole and the skis. You had your skis tied in with the tow line, and that's how you handled the big sleds. It was, I enjoyed all phases of working with dogs, and there are a lot of different activities that people are involved with. The racing is something that a lot of the people watching them enjoy. But there are a lot of individuals that go out on their own or use the dogs for hauling wood or water or whatever. So that's my comment. I was fortunate that I was able to get some old sleds and the collars and the stuff that were used during the days that they were hauling mail between villages. So, the dogs have played a very important role in the early development of, the state. So I support everything that you're doing, and I'm glad that you're getting a group together to reminisce a little bit. I knew a lot of the early pioneers that did that freighting, and and use the dogs to exist. And I'm glad I want to see racing continue. And also, when we had our AMA, the North American, we used to have the weight pull, and we spent quite a bit of time talking to people and give them an opportunity to learn what dog mushing was like. So, thank you.
Thank you. So as we talk about
Something-
these,
Yeah.
oh,
I
go
just-
ahead.
Can I say one thing? I think
Yeah.
that like Roxy was trying to say, you know, what her father and a lot of the other breeders were doing, you know, they were building real quality, good Alaskan Husky that could do everything, from even being recreational or ski joring, long distance, and sprint, middle distance, and you know, just a quality dog with good feet, good eat, you know, good habits. And that's the line that we see today, even in the people who has short hairs in their lines. You know, there's still mostly Alaskan Husky in this German short hair lines that we see today. At least 70% of Alaskan Husky. So, you know, anybody could breed out back to the Alaskan Husky, and it's not far back there. And I think they make a great recreational dogs too, because I take mine trips in White Mountains, and you know, I like to do everything with my dogs.
All right. I'm very tempted to talk like average moving speeds and run rest schedules and stuff like that, because I think the people in the audience are interested in that.
Right.
But let's grab a couple more topics that the audience is interested in. Just shout anything out. Yeah, cool.
Let's take 1975 just for argument's sake.
Okay.
As a timestamp.
Mm-hmm.
Where everybody is running more or less the same kind of dog. You've got your variations between kennels, but everybody's running a very similar kind of dog. Fast forward to today, where you have this variation in the sled dog family tree, where dogs really do physically look very, very different. Not just between kennels, but between disciplines. Because, as Dave was mentioning, you didn't have the cloth, right? You didn't have this, or you weren't using that, or the sled was different, and the equipment was different. Do you notice, as older mushers, veteran mushers, elder mushers, whichever term you want to use, a difference between the final presentation in terms of training of a dog because of that difference between, say, 1975 and now? When you look at a team, yes, the dogs are different, but are you looking at a team and going, okay, well, clearly somebody's had access to a break their whole lives. They're training differently because of that. They've had access to a snow book their whole lives. They're doing things differently because of that.
I sense what that question is. Any other questions from the audience? Nobody else has questions. Okay. Yeah. Like gang lines.
Yeah. I find this pulling animals and fitting that, and what changes?
Certainly
The question was, how have gang lines changed?
probably the biggest change there has become the braided rope, rather than in the early days it was twisted rope, or it was a different kind of braid, and you had a lot of lines that would really knot up. You know, when dogs would spin around, that the lines would just start shortening and shortening up, whereas you don't get quite that kind of twisting up with the braided nylon, like the 16 strand now, which is what most people are running. So certainly, you know, little things like that have changed. Now, for a while, there was a big thing about putting cable inside of lines. And that works in some cases, but if you get a tangle and a dog gets caught in there, you better have a side cutter real, handy, or dogs can get injured. So I don't know how many people are using that now. The Kevlar rope has also been a big improvement in lines. What they call iron rope now.
Tekla, back in the old days,
It's lubricant called Triflow, and it's good to 40 below.
Tri-flow was the tip for how do you keep your snaps from freezing.
Yep.
Don't forget, we're taking questions from the audience, but we also have to, Tekla has to repeat them into the microphone for a recording so that people who are watching this recording later can hear your questions.
Mary, what's your answer to how have gang lines changed? Or whatever.
well, we go on camping trips. If you're breaking trail in snowshoes, the dogs would be trying to stay in the middle where it was packed the hardest. So we were on the first team with these big collars. I don't know if you can see it, like a horse collar, and there'd be two straps that go back to the dog behind, and there'd be single file. And then those dogs would pull a light sled. The runners of the sled would make two passes. The second team could have all the weight, and they wouldn't be pushing themselves off the trail. Try to do a come haul with two straps going forward and two straps going backwards. That was a mess. But the first collars had caribou stuffing in them. The one I'm holding, I don't know if you can see it, was done in one. Last year in the be single file.
It's the Goldstream wideband.
Didn't people also use toggles?
Yeah, question. Did you guys use toggles on your gang lines?
I have, they work great.
Right?
Seems like those are coming back now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've
With the
seen some new.
price of the brass step being what it is, those toggles look pretty good.
Let's go back actually out to broad brushstrokes again. And we're kind of talking around this, but what do you think has improved in mushing as we look towards the future? And what do you think we're losing from when you began?
Dog care. I think the dog care, the quality of the food, and it's just improved immensely over the years.
Well, for me, I miss salmon, and that's what my dogs ate for decades, and now we can't really get it here anymore. So that to me was a huge change. And I went to a lecture by a veterinarian here last spring, and she's fairly new, and she was talking about how dogs need to have anti-inflammatory drugs. I said, what? We never needed that because salmon is a great anti-inflammatory. So that is what I miss the most is salmon.
Mary?
Okay. The thing I've noticed most is the change in the trails. When I first moved here and was mushing in the 70s, I counted 100 dog teams within a 3-mile radius of me. And you don't have that anymore. And I cut a lot of the trails in the valley. They were cut wide enough for a dog team. But they weren't wide enough for a snowmobile. They weren't really wide enough for a sprint team. They were just wide enough for a recreational team or somebody that was training for distance. When I did the first Yukon Quest, I heard the other mushers telling me how difficult the trail was and how it was harder than anything they had done. And it was easier than anything in Goldstream Valley. And right now the disadvantage I see is people have a sprint team and they have to get a double wide groomed trail because they're going too fast for almost anything that I've run on before. And there's roads. I used to be able to go from my house you know, all the way across town, drop down on the Chena and go across into the Tanana, and, you know, you have the Parks Highway and you have all this mess. It's just changing. It's just getting things are getting too filled up.
As we talk about having a really versatile dog team that can go haul wood and then go run the Rondi, then go run Iditarod, you know, what did you do to set your dogs up for success to be so versatile and have to be able to go on lots of different trails and have lots of different experiences? Anybody who's rec musher and race musher.
Well, how I did it was when I harness break pups, I like to harness break them going through water, through deep snow, because that's when they learn how to be a sled dog. And then if you get in bad trail, they know how to handle it. And if you are in a race and it's a good trail, you know, well, all the faster, all the more fun going around corners. But I always like having the versatility of the dogs being trained to do whatever conditions might show up.
How about setting yourself up for success as the musher? So if you're going out on a long distance training run or a long rec trip or a long trapping or hunting trip, what is your mental checklist before you leave your home to know that you and your dogs are going to be safe going out on that run?
Well,
or not safe. What's a shit show story?
Well, if you're gonna be gone, you gotta make sure you have enough food in case of you get bad weather or get delayed, you gotta have enough food for your dogs, you gotta have enough warm gear for yourself and food for yourself. And so, I mean, it's just common sense.
Right.
You gotta learn common sense.
One thing I learned from Joe Runyon, I don't know if everybody knows who he is. He was one of my neighbors and he said they should have a little bit of, they need to be hydrated every hour. So like a cup of broth or a little tiny piece of frozen fish or meat. And then I found, because I've taken a lot of long distance trips, that made a huge difference, like it would with us. I wouldn't want to run 50 miles and not be able to drink something. So that was huge. And I always made sure I had enough tiny little pieces so I could hydrate them.
Tekla?
Yes.
On just a short training run, I always want to be sure I come in and the dogs are happy and don't want to quit. I never, if I have a bad day, I just keep going till I have a good day before I come home. And I have to say something about your former question. Something that I've seen that I'm not happy with is to be a competitive racer. It seems like you have to have a very large kennel of dogs, which is out of the question for most people that are paying for the food. Dr. Struve used to have a sign in Aurora Clinic that said, "A dog team is the fastest way to turn money into manure." And we've all known that's true. But people that just go on camping trips, they can do that with 4 or 5 dogs and be quite happy, and it doesn't the family of the poor folks. Where a lot of racers have to have 50 dogs or more, and not many people can afford to be that big. I wish it wasn't so that was such an important thing. I think people in the villages can compete with people that have big sponsorships in town. They have to maybe pool the dogs from several teams to be able.
What is, so getting back sort of to Cole's question, obviously dragging your bunny boot on the ground makes you have a little bit of a rusty ankle, but it also probably gives you a lot of resilience and determination. Are there things that you're seeing in modern mushers that you think we lack from that kind of like versatility and hardship, or is that kind of the sense of your question, Cole? And anything we can do to instill that in young mushers again? Yes,
I
Barb.
think what's happened with the whole new evolution of dog food, because now it is so much highly packed with protein, and you got the high protein, high fat type dog food where people forget that dogs are carnivorous animals. And so what happens is that you have people that feed this high protein dog food, which actually, in my experience, every time I fed it, it would dehydrate the dogs. To where if you have regular meat or fish that you're feeding the dogs as a snack instead of the commercial food all the time, you're actually rehydrating the dogs instead of just throwing the kibble down on the ground and hoping that they get a little bit of snow, compared to what it was back in the older days, which back in 1980 Iams just came out with their high protein dog food. And I mean, the people that ended up with that was Rick Swenson and your mom, and the more high elite people. Us people that were like in the lower levels, we were feeding Casco, which was a 22-18 dog food. So that means that we had to supplement a lot of our meat. I mean, a lot with meat. And of course, then what happens? You get a dog that says, "Are you get a dog team?" Will go say, "Nope, I don't want to eat." And then you become the master chef of dog food, is what I call it, because then you try to figure out, okay, what have I tried and what I have not tried. And it's kind of interesting is like 4 or 5 years ago, Mark Hartman was here when he was still racing. And him and I got kind of close. Anyway, he was telling me, he goes, "Barb," he says, "I got 4 dogs that I can't get them to eat." Now, sprint dogs of that caliber cannot afford to lose 2 or 3 pounds. I mean, it has to be consistent. And I told Mark, I said, "Well, I think I have something that you can actually use to get those dogs to eat." And he goes, "Well, can I go buy it?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'll make you some." And it's called the good old honey balls. And people have forgotten about these things. And that's what it is all it is you're making up like a meatloaf type consistency with meat, wheat germ, the not the liquid, but the flakes. It's meat, wheat germ, honey, and eggs. And you take and you make that up. And so between the honey and the eggs will actually get the dog's metabolism back to where they'll start eating again. And actually you can use it in your water. You can use it as baited water. So the first time I ever heard about honey balls was from Joe Reddington Sr. And he's the one that told me about it in 1979 or 78. And let me tell you, when I gave some of those to Mark, I made him up like 10 pounds. And I made little honey balls, which are about this big around. And I said, "Here," I said, "give your dogs each one of these an hour before you feed." And he goes, "Well, what are they?" And I said, just do it. And he did. And so I went back the next day and I said, "So did the dogs eat?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "They ate everything in sight." And I said, he goes, "What are those?" And I said, "They're called honey balls." And he goes, "Well, where did you learn this?" I said, "Back in 1978. So it's stuff like that that people have forgotten. And they try to use, all this other stuff instead of going back to kind of the basics. The other thing too was feeding raw chicken with salmonella. And you'd end up with dogs with diarrhea. I mean, it's gross. So, and what happens is you don't have, you end up with these chicken skins and turkey skins that have been laying around in the processing plant that can end up with salmonella, and you have no idea. So I never fed salmon. I never fed chicken skins or turkey skins ever. What I did is, in D.D. John Rose, the one that turned me on to this one, was using canned dog food. You use the not the chunky kind, but the stuff that comes out in the can. So all you do is open the bottom up, take a knife and cut the top, cut it out, and you can get 4 snacks out of 1 can of dog food. Which in turn, you are getting the meat, the vitamins, and also the water in that as far as a snack. It's the most cheapest snack that you could buy.
Go ahead, Roxy.
You were asking about, what's been lost from back then to today. And I don't feel like we've lost anything. There was good dogs and good mushers, and back before I was ever born, and when I was racing, and today there are many, many good mushers and good dogs. They might be different, but they're still, they love the sport and are supporting it. And I think I'm very proud of our young people today and what they're doing and carrying on the sport. And I'm just happy for that.
Heck yeah, me too.
I'll second that because on the Yukon Quest 80, in the last 2 years, the first, second, and third placers were all juniors under 18 that took first, second, and third on that race in an 80-mile race. So, these kids that are coming up, they're pulling the information off the internet, off of other mushers. And they're making it their own. Those 3 girls that came in first, second, and third on that 80-miler, I was the race marshal. I was just amazed. They ran 40 miles in 3 hours and 15 minutes. It just, I'm just sitting there going, wow, and yet they went on and not just did the 80-miler, but they've done a 200-miler and actually won it. Emily Robinson, perfect example. She has done her homework, but not only that, her mom and dad too. They've come up with a line that is just amazing. So,
Mari, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I just feel that there's some really, really good mushers today, but like when I first came to Alaska, a lot of the people that were on top then are still people that we look up to today. And in both the distance world and sprint world. And I think we shouldn't forget because the one thing that dog mushers are not good at is to be authors and talk about or write maybe books. Like in the sheepdog world, I've been into like training border collies too over the years, and they're really good at like writing things down for people to read and learn. And I think that's one thing we need to work on with all the knowledge that we learn, because every time you go out to train and work with your dogs, even just out in the dog yard, you learn something every day. Just keep open-minded.
Yep.
I think it's really important we try to help young people that want to get into the sport. No, you don't need to have a big, huge kennel to be competitive. If you work with what you have, and if you have good quality dogs, and a good dog eats as much, or a bad dog eats as much as a good dog, and just stay focused, I think is important. If you have a breeding program, and kind of get the kind of dogs you like to work with, and find, and when you meet people that wants to get into the sport, you just introduce them and get them started. It's important. Not everybody wants to do what you want to do. If you are into, say, just recreational running, maybe that person wants to try racing, you know, nothing wrong with that. And that's the way we find out who we are.
I think what I'm picking up on is that there is absolutely something timeless and romantic about being out on the runners, which is why we all continue to do it, no matter when we started. And I think that is true no matter if you got to the race via a Facebook post or if you got to the race because you heard that they were running the first Iditarod. And so I think that we're all having a very similar experience out there. We do have 10 minutes left, so I want to just pose the question, what is a really memorable day? Not your best day, not your worst day, just a memorable day. We'll do a few stories before we close out.
I'll do one.
Go ahead.
I read about something that happened and I experienced it. It was when Carol and I were going to Nome. We were traveling from Koyuk to Elam, we'd camped midway overnight. And I was ahead, heading into Elam, going along the road. And I came into what do you call it? A flock of rabbits. I mean, there must have been hundreds of snowshoe hares running parallel to the trail, crossing the trail. I mean, the dogs just took off. I heard about these groups of hares showing up before, and I just consider myself really lucky to have run into it.
That's pretty epic.
And Carol missed it. They were all gone by the time she got there.
I remember, and I can't tell you exactly where it was, but I was a night mush, and the Northern Lights was just one of those phenomenal nights. And I remember stopping the dog team for some reason, and it was the first time I heard the Northern Lights. It was, it was way out, it was quiet, the dogs were quiet, and I could hear this hum. And, the lights were so intense that it was actually casting a dark shadow. It was bright. And I just remember that was like, okay, yeah, that's why I'm here. Yeah, this is great.
Well,
I remember going down the trail. Oops.
Go ahead, Mary.
Going on the quest a second time and meeting people I had met the year before, and what good friends you make on the trail. When Shirley was talking about the trails not being wide enough to pass each other, in the old days when you met another team, you stopped and had a cup of tea with each other. Then all of a sudden everyone was training and they didn't want to stop. When I was on the Iditarod, Red Olson had a birthday, and we got to Galena, we bought ice cream, and about 10 of the teams that were racing ate ice cream, and we celebrated his birthday. And it was a very joyful thing.
Nice.
But you meet wonderful people out in the bush, and the hospitality is like nothing else, and they don't forget you in time going by.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Well, I remember this might have been like 1987. We had a new handler come in from the Midwest. She was young and she was going out on her very first ride with me that night. There was a full moon. She had a team. I had an 8-dog team, so did she. And we wound, this was outside Nenana, we wound through the forest about 2 miles. And then we came out into a big wide open space, and there was a lot of deep snow. Anyway, all of a sudden, as we turn, a moose comes charging out from the woods, and he comes right up to us and then turns and he's galloping along with us. And then, I don't know, for maybe a quarter of a mile, and then he went off. And this gal thought this is what it was like. The Northern Lights were out too. Wow. Yeah, he was like this.
Hilarious. Jeff, do you have any stories?
Oh, I guess kind of my most memorable day mushing was the first time I competed in the pedigree stage stop race. The last stage, I didn't know whether I was going to be able to go or not. because the number of the dogs looked a little bit lame and but got enough together that we could go. And so anyway, and then I had to load a leader, and it wasn't really my best day on the sled, but just finishing that race, I was just the happiest I've ever been mushing, more even than when I won, races, but yeah.
Is there a dog, any specific dogs you want to call out from your career that really stuck with you? Or... Yes, go ahead, Barb.
I had a dog named Boots, and he was a guy in Nome had him, and I asked if I could borrow him for the Iditarod, and he did not know his commands at all, but he knew the trail because he had been up the trail 2 other times before. And there's actually a song out about him too. Anyway, he was an amazing dog. He followed stakes, and I did not know this until I got into a blizzard up between Walla Walla and into Gullivan, going up over there. And we go along, and all of a sudden you kind of drift off the trail, and then all of a sudden you can feel the sled jerk. And they did that for like 3 or 4 times. I'm thinking, what the heck is going on up there? Because I couldn't see him. And so when he jerked, I actually looked down, and this stake was going right behind me. Well, Norman Vaughn and Landon Carter were following me. And we got into Gullivan because we stopped there for a minute and to snack and whatever. And Norman come hobbling up to me because Norman was 89 years old. And Norman come hobbling up to me. He goes, Barb. He goes, did you feed that dog alcohol back there in Gila? And I'm going, no. I said, did you see that we were right next to stakes? And he goes, yeah. He says, but my leaders were doing the same thing. And I said, yeah. And the dog was amazing. And so I was supposed to give him back. I gave him back in Nome to the owner. He got loose, and he ended up at my doorstep, which he had never been to my house ever in Nome. He ended up at my doorstep. And I opened the door up, and there he was. And I'm thinking, Boots, what are you doing here? And he took off and went back up to the dog lot up on Chicken Hill. So the dog was just an amazing dog. And he actually went with Lisa and I on her first junior at Iditarod too.
So cool.
Nice.
Rob, go ahead.
Yeah. Human physiology is what I study more than anything else now. I don't race dogs anymore. But 67 to 80% of Americans, United States citizens, are low on magnesium. And if you talk to Terry Streeper and other people that study that and supplement certain things in their dog menu, that's a very important thing. And all of these folks along the aisle here, they know that some dogs will get stoved up. What does that mean? It means they're cramping because of the lack of magnesium. Magnesium is essential for the relaxation phase of a muscle contraction. And if you don't understand that, you need calcium electrolytes in your blood system for humans, but it's really the same for dogs too. Their heart muscle and all of those things have to have certain electrolytes in order to keep their blood pH at a certain level. But I know very little about the blood pH of dogs. But and I also thought Tekla was asking about things that we remember and so on. I don't remember as much as what I remember since I stopped racing. And one morning I was going to go over and talk to Heine Winter from Germany. And everybody that knew, and this young lady, I can't remember her name, but anyway, if you ever saw Heine Winter's dogs, I went to he had a big, what do you call it, that carried his dogs, his 19 dogs that he flew in from Germany. And I went to his place and there were no dogs, no Heine, 7 o'clock in the morning before the Toke race. And so I stood there with my camera and so on, and pretty soon here he comes. Out of the woods, 19 dogs free, out of the woods. And these dogs, everywhere he walked, they followed him. These big, long lanky Euro hounds. And then when he started feeding them, he'd put down a tray of food and he'd call a name, and only that dog would come and eat and so on. And what I got out of that more than anything else was those dogs were not, they didn't really particularly want to race, but they loved their master. And whatever their master asked them to do, and they had the physical ability, it's just unbelievable. And whenever I do programs, and I'm hoping to do some programs, I always have that picture of Heine walking around with these dogs, jumping up on his chest. And the other dog that I always, two other dogs, very quickly. Nellie was George's dog that one of his brothers or cousins or whatever raised, and Doc Lombard saw Nellie run in the race. And Doc said, I want to buy that dog. And George says, that's fine, $1,000. No one ever thought about it. But that won more races for Doc Lombard than you can imagine. And later, George would say to me, when he asked him about Nellie, he said, Nellie would take you any place you wanted to go.
And we could talk about any of those questions as everyone else could.
No, that's okay.
And then Nugget, of course, won the 1974 and the 1975 Iditarod.
Yep.
And that was Emmett Peters' dog.
Yep.
That Carl Huntington brawled in 74. And Nugget took Carl to Nome in a little over 20 days. And so Emmett took the dog back, and in 1975, with much better weather conditions than in 74, Emmett said he run that race in less than 15 days with Nellie. And Emmett told me a story. He said one time they went into this yard, and here's the cabin, and he had no idea why the dog team went in. And so he set a snow hook, and he went up and knocked on the door, and the guy came out and started talking to him. And pretty soon, somehow someone said, Carl. And the man said, yeah, Carl camped here. Nugget, a year later, remembered camping at this particular lot, this particular cabin. So dogs are amazing. If you get a dog like that, it's just fortuitous. It's just very pure, excellent luck. I mean, yes, there are lots of good dogs, but some of those dogs are unbelievably exceptional.
Roger, do you have a dog you'd like to mention or a memorable day mushing?
Well,
a good day.
The dog that I liked the most was Naki. She was a weight pulling champion. She was a wheel dog, and whenever the going got rough, she was in there urging the other dogs on. So we all have a favorite dog, and she was one that we really enjoyed. I also had other dogs, that were characters and kept us entertained and on our toes. The big thing I liked about mushing is that you were keeping the dogs in shape and you were also keeping yourself. And I like the physical aspects of driving dogs and also the opportunity to work with other people that have the same interests we do. So I'm glad that you were able to go ahead and have this get together today. And thank you for putting it on.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Let's thank our panelists. Okie dokie, some announcements. So we've got books for sale. We've got Mari's book. We've got Mary's book. We've got Downey's book.
And raffle tickets?
Yep. So if you want to continue your journey of learning from other people and learning from yourself, there are some books for sale. We've got raffle tickets, and we're going to do a little drawing for some door prizes. And then we're also selling raffle tickets throughout our entire education program this winter, which is once a month, every something Thursday, whatever this is, second Thursday, every second Thursday throughout the winter. And so we'll be selling 50-50 raffle tickets, and we'll draw those at the end of the season, which is going to be very exciting. We've got some awesome thank you gifts for our presenters, or our panelists, which Nora will give them. And I think as soon as Nora finishes handing out the door prize bucket, we shall draw a door prize. Viz. Any last
Final notes?
Yeah, any final notes from our presenters or questions from the audience?
Nora was here.
I don't know. I was still.
I would love to say,
We could. Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
I don't mean to be butting in so much, but I would just like to give, tell mushers today to cherish every day they get to go out on the trail, because there'll be a time when they can't go out on the trail and they'll miss it like crazy. So every time you can go out and stay out as long as you can. That's all I wanted to say.
Nice.
Mary has a birthday coming up on Monday.
Happy birthday, Mary.
Happy birthday to you.
But I'm in a wheelchair now because I did have an ankle. I live on a hill, and I'd always break with my one foot, and my ankle bones wore out. But if I had all over to do it again, I'd do the whole thing over again. It was worth it. But just don't take it for granted. Just get out there and work with your dogs. Now I bring my dogs in the house, and I see a whole different side of them that I didn't know when they were just team dogs. And I really recommend that. The dogs love it, and you get to know them better. I'm sorry if I keep butting in all the time.
You're amazing. No worries.
So I
Go.
want to say, one thing I've always loved is taking photos of the dogs and all the places I've been, if I could. So I no longer have my website because my back isn't what it used to be. So I have it's on Facebook, Sled Dog Adventures, 3 words. That was my business, Sled Dog Adventures. And go through there, and it's just photos of the dogs that they're smiling, they're jumping, and we're in the most beautiful places. And every day I would say, this is so incredible. I am so lucky to get to do this, but just look at their smiling faces.
All right, come on, you.
I don't know if Mary can hear me. Mary and Roger and Mari, when I see you next, I'll get the thank you gift to you. Thank you.
Yay.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Nora, for putting together the ADMA Education Committee. All right, there's that bucket.